So we have the boss and Marco and the king going into town. And the boss decides to invite people over to Marco's house, which is kind of rude, but Marco's somewhat okay with it, but he starts worrying that, he's going to have to pay to feed these people. And Marco, the coal maker, doesn't have that much money. But the boss is like, I'm going to pay for it. And then there's arguments because, it's difficult to, it's weird to accept money from people. And you kind of have, there are rules about doing it, and you just kind of have to figure it out. And if someone says, here, take money, generally it's refuse. Because that's the polite thing to do. You offer to pay, and then you refuse. And there's usually different rules in different places about how much offer you have to make and how much refusal you have to do. And sometimes it's like, okay, person offers twice, refuses twice. Generally, I kind of follow a rule of three. It's like offer. If they refuse, I'll offer again, and they refuse again. And it's like maybe offer a third time, maybe not. Or if they refuse and I offer and they refuse twice, it's like, okay. And so it's like, you do these things. He talks about the money. He goes to a shopkeeper. He's buying something. He has a $20 gold coin. And so the guy first tries to bite it. And you can't really bite you can leave teeth marks in a very pure gold coin because gold is a very soft metal. He dings it on the counter. And by dinging on the counter, you get a sense from the pitch of the ding of how dense the coin is. And gold is a very dense metal. It's one of the 4 or 5 densest metals there is. You have to get really exotic to get something denser than gold. Tungsten is about the same density. Uranium is more dense. Iridium is more dense, but you don't find uranium and iridium just kind of lying around. Iridium is just like insanely expensive. Uranium is more expensive than gold. Tungsten is not cheap, but it's cheaper than gold. And there's actually been places where people have drilled out gold bars and stuffed them with tungsten rods and then patched up the end with gold. And in the process, they kept the bars roughly the same weight. So gold bullion bars, which are done by mints and exactly measured and rated for purity, and everyone trusts them. There have been some of those which have been swapped out when people have bored out the gold and inserted tungsten. Because the thing is that because tungsten's density is almost exactly the same as that of gold, you won't be able to tell by a scale. And you would have to physically destroy the bar in order to do it. They're both fairly X-ray opaque. You might be able to get it if you were to X-ray it or use something like a MRI. But by just looking at it, you couldn't tell. By weighing it, you can't tell. And another thing they did was acid. Now, there is a fairly common rock called iron pyrite, which is a compound of iron and sulfur. And iron pyrite looks like gold. But there are a couple of things
What's its nickname, Mark?
Oh, yes, Lolly, thank you. It is known as fool's gold. But there are a few easy ways to tell it apart from gold. The first way is that it tends to be brittle. So if you hit a rock and it shatters, probably not gold. If you hit a lump of gold, it'll just bend and distort. And second thing is that gold is referred to as a noble metal. Now there's gases called noble gases, which is helium, argon, xenon, radon, neon. And these gases don't interact with anything. It is nigh on impossible to get them to react with stuff. So if you have helium, you have a single atom of helium. Usually when you find stuff, you find carbon, you find 2 carbons linked together, or 20 carbons linked together. When you find hydrogen, you find two hydrogen atoms linked together. You find two oxygen atoms linked together, two nitrogen atoms linked together. You find all these atoms linked together in pairs. Not so much with the noble gases. The noble gases are one helium, one argon, one neon, one xenon, one radon. Just one by itself, because all of the electrical orbits are filled. And as I said, they're really, really difficult to get to react with things. Gold is one of those other things. Gold doesn't react with things. It is very difficult to get it to dissolve or to corrode or anything like that. So gold is often used for coatings of metals. So what you can do is you can put a gold plating on top of something, and while the gold will adhere to the metal, it won't corrode. You can put acid on gold, it won't eat through it. You can put a base on gold, it won't eat through it. The only real way you can dissolve gold is with something called Aqua Regia, which is the king's water. And what that is highly concentrated nitric acid, highly concentrated sulfuric acid, and cyanide. Because the cyanide can form a compound with the gold, and the cyanide can react with the gold, and then the nitric acid can dissolve it. And the reason the sulfuric acid is there is to kind of recycle the nitric acid. There's some advanced chemistry that I don't know that goes into that. But it's the combination of those three things is able to eat through gold. But generally, if you have a household acid and you put gold in it, it will just sit there. If you have caustic lye, if you have drain cleaner, do not test these things, really. Do not do any of this stuff. But if you have like drain cleaner and gold goes into the drain cleaner, nothing will happen, because the gold just does not react. So that's why he tested it with acid. He banged it on the counter just to make sure that, the gold was real, because counterfeiting is a problem. And counterfeiting metal coins is more difficult than counterfeiting paper money. Now, one of the other things, talking about money, is he talked about purchasing power parity, which is a fairly modern concept, but it's how much money you can buy, or how much stuff you can buy with how much effort. So if you say, okay, I'm going to be paid $1 a day, or here we had the laborer getting paid $3 a day. So he gets paid $3 a day, and for a day's wages, he can buy a suit. Now, the guy down south was getting paid $50 a day. So he was getting paid, in theory, 10, 20 times as much. But his suit cost $75, which is like a day and a half of work. So instead of being paid more, because $50 is more than $3, he was actually being paid less, because he was getting paid 2/3 of a suit of clothes, as opposed to the other guy who was getting paid a suit of clothes. And so this is one of those things where you have this inflation. And this has happened a whole bunch of times throughout history, where the government decides that they need more money for whatever. And so instead of raising taxes and taking money from people and then spending it, what they do is they just print more money and print more money and print more money, which is in a lot of ways kind of like counterfeiting. But it's very much like counterfeiting, except the government does it and it's legal. So, government prints all of this money, and because the government's doing it, they have to take it. Because the government's saying you have to take this money, you have to take the money. And so people were like, well, I have all of this money and I'm going to buy stuff. And, the merchants, the people who make the clothes, the people who make the anvils, who make the hammers, who make the stuff go, wait a minute, you're coming at me with all of this money. I still have the same amount of stuff and you have all of this more money. Prices go up. So those prices go up and everyone ends up more miserable because there's this tendency to increase the prices more than the amount of the money supply increases. And once prices go up, it is very difficult to get them back down again. So, because everyone panics when you say deflation, because what happens is if I can buy something for $1 today, if I can buy it for 50 cents tomorrow, I'm going to wait for it to go on sale. That at least is the theory. But that all goes to price elasticity, and there's some memory, but there's not. I don't know. It's weird. There are economists who understand this better, though I imagine that if you were to ask them, they would all give different answers. So my answer of I don't know entirely, but it's difficult is possibly the best one out there. Though, if you find one, let me know.